Welcome to the Paddle and Portage podcast. Today's story starts in the wild places of northern Minnesota, takes us all over the country, but inevitably brings us right back here. The story starts with Kelcy.
Hi, I'm Kelcy Huston. So growing up in Duluth, hiking up the creeks, swimming, hiking, going through culverts, I always thought that was fun. And then I went to school in Duluth, and after that I was just really itching to just see somewhere that wasn't Duluth or maybe not even Minnesota. I hadn't really done a whole lot of traveling. And so then I kind of ended up on a series of outdoor-based jobs. And so I was outside for work, and then I was also outside recreating for a long time. Hiking was kind of the main deal because that's just, all you need are a pair of shoes. And then at some point that transitioned into paddling, and whitewater became my big fixation.
So how Kelcy first came onto our radar for the podcast was through her father, Pat.
Hi, I'm Pat Huston. I was born and raised in Duluth, the youngest of 5, by quite a shot, kind of a Catholic caboose, but just loved Duluth. My dad and my family, we enjoyed the outdoors, bird hunting, deer hunting, have a deer camp north of town that we just really enjoy going to. So spent a lot of time there, and, as the kids came along, started bringing them up to camp in the fall, doing preparations when they're little. I was a scout leader for a while with one of the Duluth troops. Kind of got into the backpacking bug there and transitioned into Spear Hiking Trail. We've done some of that. I went to the Boundary Waters quite a bit when I was younger with my dad, but I have not really been up there since college. I'm not a paddler. I would like to get into that, but I've been up there more now backpacking, trying to knock off all the trails in the Boundary Waters.
Pat had been listening to the podcast for years back and wanted to essentially brag about his daughter Kelcy and her paddling adventures. So Pat started to send us a number of emails in January and February, and a majority of those emails, the theme of them, was about how Kelcy has taken paddling from a hobby into an obsession.
Kelcy, we had that trip out to Glacier and did the Yellowstone, and we did the canyoneering that you invited us on. So it's really been special. So I'm getting at a point in my life where, Joe, I met you through the Border Route Trail meeting, right? And I read your book. It's very good. So that's kind of how we landed here.
Canoecopia is coming up just around the corner now, and we will be there among other people with Carlson Roasting Company and Loon's Nest Coffee. They're located up the Gunflint Trail. Been talking with Bob a lot this year already about the cold brew instant coffee. Bob's just stoked about this cold brew instant coffee. Every time we chat with him, he's mentioning it. So we're excited to check it out at Canoecopia. Bob and the team from Carlson Roasting and Loon's Nest, it's a joint operation. They are going to be on site. We're going to be trying some of it. I'm sure that there will be some samples available. Boundary Waters Brew instant coffee that Bob and the team have. So we'll check that out among many other things. One of our favorite roasts that they have at Loon's Nest is the Paddler's Portage. Yes, Bob, did you name that for us? I need to get verification on that. So you can Google Loon's Nest Coffee, or loonsnest.coffee is the website, or carlsonroasting.com. Look forward to seeing them and hopefully you at Canoecopia in Madison, March 7th through the 9th.
Kelcy's been to the BWCA twice, but now she's aiming to paddle the rivers of the North Shore.
I've only actually been to the Boundary Waters twice. The first time was in high school with a friend, and it poured the entire time we were there. It was still a good trip, but we got to paddle in and have it be clear. And then I think we had about 2 hours while we were there and it was clear. And then just the classic bugs and everything. Doesn't mean it wasn't still a good trip. And then I have one of my good friends from college. She was doing master's research up there that I've been to help with. But now that I'm back in the area, it's definitely on the list to go do some more exploring.
Do you at all feel drawn to kayak the rivers on the shore?
Oh yeah, I've already got it all mapped out. So, and I've paddled, I mean, the Cloquet doesn't dump right into the lake, but I've paddled the Cloquet. But for the most part, since I've been back in Minnesota, the water levels just haven't been high enough. But I'm excited.
So this obsession that Pat told us about and that Kelcy confirmed started out west in Idaho.
Yeah, definitely built. And I think for the last 3 or 4 years, I've had close to 100 days on the water every year and been really fortunate to paddle in a lot of different areas across different states, and then also just like really deeply exploring some of Southern Oregon and Northern California to some like just hidden gems, and I think, yeah, bordering on like obsession a little bit. Even before I went out west, when I was at UMD, UMD actually has like a really strong whitewater program. I didn't really get into it until the tail end of my time there. It was like my final semester. I ended up going to a couple of pool sessions to try to learn how to roll. 0 success. And then I was graduated and kind of off. So I was bopping along doing my jobs. And then when I showed up to my first Forest Service job in Idaho, I ended up there. They were the first place that called me back, and I did a quick Google search, and it was like mountains, beautiful river, hot springs, you know, not a terribly far distance from a full service town, about an hour. So I was like, that's great, sounds good to me. And when I showed up, a lot of my coworkers were like former raft guides and hardcore river people, and they were there because we were living right on the Lochsa River, which a lot of people would consider maybe like the best stretch of day paddling class 4 in the country. But then being there, so one of the guys, he had a raft, and then there was another guy there who was bigger into the kayaking, and so anybody on the crew that wanted to go down the river, they were like, yeah, let's go. We got a raft, we got a safety kayaker, and so that was my first actual experience on a whitewater river.
Support for this episode of the podcast comes from Borderland Lodge, inviting listeners to unwind, explore, and create lasting memories against the backdrop of the Boundary Waters. They're offering pet-friendly cabins, lakeside lodge rooms, and cozy weekend dining along the shores of Gunflint Lake. You can find more about Borderland at their website, borderlandlodge.com. Also, check out their Instagram page for some of the incredible Italian pasta meals that Steph is making up at Borderland. Steph was showing us some of the recipes and ideas that she has for some of those pasta dishes. Oh my goodness, check it out, Borderland Lodge on Instagram and Facebook, or their website, borderlandlodge.com. After paddling the rivers in and around the Montana-Idaho border, Kelcy started to set her sights on something bigger, and that included a trip to the Grand Canyon.
From there, I had a job lined up in California, and then one of the folks that I met in Idaho, we ended up being in a couple year-long relationship. It was the safety kayaker, and so just kind of naturally, we were on the phone one day, and he was saying how we gotta get you down the Grand Canyon at some point. Like, we gotta get you down the Grand Canyon. And then he called me the next day and he said, you're never gonna believe this, but my mom got a Grand Canyon permit. And so the plan was kind of in motion. And then we're talking a little bit more about how it was all gonna look. And he said, hey, you can either ride in a raft, or we could go in a tandem kayak if you want to do that. And I was like, well, if you're sure that that's like an okay idea, like if that's actually gonna work, sure. And so that's what we did, and it was amazing.
Paddling gave Kelcy a way to connect and to socialize and meet other people. As it started to become her obsession, she was also falling in love with the community of people that were also getting out to paddle. The variations on the paddling trips, the variations in people, this alternate way of life was an incredibly enticing experience for her that showed up day after day after day.
I have friends. I mean, my friend Maddie comes to mind immediately. It's like I've done 2 Grand Canyon trips with her and a handful of other trips with her. I've only seen her like on a land venture once, but you get all this. It's like friendship and relationships are accelerated in this kind of setting or whatever, because it's, if you think about it, it's like, I mean, we've got 2 months worth of time together in, you know, like a sort of intense setting. And if you think of one of your, for lack of a better term, real life friends, I mean, it could take over a year to get to that level of getting to know somebody. And I don't know why it's a good fit for me necessarily, but it can be really calm and serene. It can be really exciting and intense. There's so many different mini paddling niches. Just to be in a situation where it's like, once you start going down the rapid, doesn't matter if you're ready or not, like you're gonna keep going. And I love the exploration aspect of it too. I mean, paddling can take you to places that for the most part you really can't hardly access otherwise if you weren't on the water, you know? I love that part of it.
Meanwhile, Pat was back in Duluth, following Kelcy's adventures from afar. He said it was nerve-wracking to have his daughter have this high-risk hobby or obsession, but he was proud of her adventures. In fact, he was so proud, he started to encourage some younger people he was meeting in and around Duluth to get out there and live an adventure.
First of all, you know, I always tell my coworkers, I've been a really tight-knit team over the years, kind of what's going on in Kelcy's life. So from a parent's perspective, it's pretty nerve-wracking at times. I mean, it's just, if you're a parent, you'll get that, right? But so all my work friends, that's so cool, that's so cool. And I'm like, if it was your child, I'll bet you, and you were home with your spouse, you would be a little more apprehensive, you know? But I want to bring this home. I don't even know if I don't think I've told Kelcy this story. So I'm a civil engineer, and a couple times I've been in a mentoring program at UMD. And one year, this was 5 years ago, the deal was to mentor seniors that are about to go in the workforce. And so this young gentleman, quite a young guy, he was going to graduate. And I kind of told him about Kelcy, you know, because I came out of school, went right to work. That's kind of what we did. And I'm like, man, don't tell your parents I said this, but you should really think about taking a year off. Because he was telling me about ties to Stanley, Idaho. And I told him about some of your adventures, Kelcy, and it's like, man, you got your whole life to work. So incredibly proud of her and jealous, but it's nerve-wracking as a parent too, right? And the other thing, I just think of that map you have in your room with the pins on it of everywhere you've been. I mean, you kind of, it's like, it's impressive, super impressive.
Pat describes himself as more measured. His risk tolerance is different than Kelcy's. Though he loves the outdoors and exploring wild places, he would never be the first to throw himself over a waterfall or even down swift water.
I don't know I mean, she has always been, let me put it this way. We have different risk tolerances. I'm just going to say that, and it's always been different. I'm more conservative, more measured. I'm an engineer, okay? I grew up in a different time. Kelcy's got a lot more risk tolerance, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing. We're just different.
But that DNA is in the family somewhere. It came from somewhere in Pat.
So, you know, Joe, you and I have talked about my sister, and that's a story for another time. So my sister Mary was lost at sea, but she was the free spirit of my family, and I see a lot of Kelcy in her.
When we first started receiving emails from Pat, learning about Kelcy and her adventures, it seemed like no coincidence to us that we also were receiving some emails from Pat about his sister, Mary. Multiple news articles came our way from Pat that recounted a tragic loss. Mary, while exploring Hawaii, taking time to live and work there, went out on the ocean with 2 new friends in a catamaran. Mary was never seen or heard from again.
That was in the mid-1980s, and it's still difficult for Pat to talk about today.
So, yeah, Mary was 7 years older than me. Like I said, I was kind of the caboose of the family. And I will never forget that in my life. I was a freshman down at the University of Minnesota. It was finals week. I came home. This is really hard. I just walked in and I saw my parents. She had been missing for days. They didn't tell me because they didn't want me to get upset and mess up finals. They figured she would be found. It was just devastating for the family. You know, weeks of air search finally called off. Somehow, one of her high school classmates called my parents, who was in the Navy in the RIMPAC naval exercises, and said, maybe we can find a pop can at 100 miles. We'll find it. Multiple catamarans were found in pieces. I mean, even it was a Hobie cat. Hobie Alter wrote a check for $5,000 to the search. Nobody ever found. Nobody ever found. And there's also a theory that they drifted into a naval firing range. But she had I think she had been in Kauai less than a week. She was going to stay with a girlfriend who had just gotten married, worked the summer there as a waitress, and it wasn't even a week. And she was lost at sea with 2 others. So, free spirit, loved to ski, loved everything outdoors. And she kind of bounced in and out of UMD, drove my parents absolutely crazy. So, to know my parents, they both grew up through the Depression. My dad was a World War II veteran. You know, and here I come, the last kid, and Mary was kind of at the tail end there too, right? So she was bouncing in and out of Steamboat, working the lifts, working a lift foreman, you know, and just loved that free spirit stuff. So even, Kelcy, when you went west that one time, I know you stopped at Steamboat to visit Mary's friend Deb and learn about her. But they just seem like they're kind of cut from the same cloth. Just the stories. So she was known, you can edit this out if it's not appropriate, but she was known as Mary the Mooner. So at my oldest sister's wedding, the reception was poolside in a hotel down in the Twin Cities. I was a little kid. My mom had to go back to the room. She had forgotten something. Mary was in there. My mom knocked on the door. She didn't have her key, and the curtains opened, and there was Mary mooning. Okay, so my mom grew up to Depression, right? That was kind of her trademark. And, you know, if you live around this area, you probably may have heard of the Club Saratoga. I won't go anywhere bad with this, but my understanding back in the day, they had a bus they ran around town that would take people, and Mary got in trouble mooning the Club Saratoga bus from the police. So, I mean, that's kind of her MO, just fun-loving, and we have the memorial bench for her on the lake walk behind Fitkers, and it actually says to Mitsamoya, my dad called her that, I think it means Mary mine, and it might be Slovenian or Slovakian, who always loved the full moon. And my mom never got that. It just buzzed right over her head, because there's a bench looking at Lake Superior like, hey, you're looking at the full moon, right? So just, those are great memories.
Pat, despite having every tangible excuse from our perspective to want to discourage his daughter Kelcy from the risk-prone activities that she has been falling in love with throughout her life, he chose to encourage her exploration. He chose to support her experiences of pushing her comfort zone and building community through adrenaline-fueled and thoughtful adventures.
And not only did he embrace it, eventually he was invited to participate in it.
I mean, I'm not unwilling to take risks. So Kelcy and her former friend invited a friend and I to Zion. This was 2020 or 21. It was during COVID, to go canyoneering. Okay. I'm not a climber. I'm not a ropes person, right? And so we did a bunch of slot canyons. I had to like shift my paradigm there, right? And I remember the first time I had to step off a slot, Zach said, "Ooh, this is probably not a good one to start on," because you couldn't run your feet all the way down. It was almost a full rope and pretty much a free hang. So I mean,
Dad is good. I'll give him credit. Dad is good about getting out of his comfort zone with a little support.
Yeah, that's hardcore.
that trip was a blast.
In addition to a hiking and canyoneering trip to Zion National Park in Utah, Kelcy and Pat also took a river trip together down the Grand Canyon.
At one point, a couple years ago, it was after one of my trips, and I was talking to Mom and Dad on the phone, and I was telling Dad, like, you should really come on one of these sometime. And he was like, I don't know, I just don't think I want to, that's like a long trip, a big commitment. I don't know, that might just be like more than I want to, kind of dive into. But I just kept working on him. And then the opportunity arose, and so then...
That was amazing. That kind of put me out of my comfort zone a little bit too. But I mean, there's 16 people on that permit, and that's during the non-commercial season, right, Kels? So there's not a lot of people on the river. I think we saw a couple other parties.
It's nothing's ever going to compare to the first time like you experience something like that yourself. So then to be able to share that with the people that you love and like witness them experience that thing. So yeah, I mean, I really wanted to take my dad and my brother down the Grand Canyon. It's a lottery permit system. And so basically what I did was I went through my entire phone contact list and I wrote down everybody who was either a river person, or even if they weren't a river person, like if they were into the outdoors and hardy and I thought they would have a good time on the trip, I said, hey, you should apply for this permit. And if you get it, I will plan the entire trip. And so then, yeah, my roommate's boyfriend, who I'm also pretty good friends with, he ended up pulling the permit. And so then we got to plan the trip, and I got to take my dad and my brother and, fill the rest of the permit with a bunch of high quality folks. And it was a great time.
It was amazing. Derek and I flew to Las Vegas, and Kelcy picked us up at the airport on our way from Oregon, where we were on our way to Flagstaff. Got to spend a couple days, day and a half there banging around, and then got to Flagstaff. But it was just such an amazing trip to me. Kelcy was such a great crew boss. She split us up into work crews. You want to talk about that, Kelcy, or you want me to?
I've been on like a handful of river trips that have been handled, different. I've seen like different leadership styles and different, structure patterns. So I've like seen some things that I like more and I like less. And so on the Grand Canyon, I mean, it's the trip of a lifetime, but it's a working vacation. We had 6 rafts that were 18 feet each. They're all over a ton. Some of them are probably closer to 4,000 pounds, and you're unloading and reloading that gear, if not every day, every other day. And then, cooking for 16 people in the backcountry, that's a whole thing. There's no food resupplies. And then you pack out all your waste. So you have the river world. I don't know in canoeing if you call it a groover, but in the whitewater world, you call it a groover. You pack out all your ashes from your fire. So we kind of split into 4 groups of 4, and you rotate between cooking, groover duty, fire duty, and then you get a day off. Cooking duty is like obviously the biggest thing, but so that's kind of how we structured that aspect of just dividing and conquering. I did describe it, and I was like the old timer on the trip, right? Everybody affectionately called him Pops.
Oh, well, there's more to that. But I'm like, this is like a plane crash every day when we hit the beach. And they're like, what? I'm like, look at this. It's like a plane crash. And the next morning, it's leave no trace. You know, it's a tremendous amount of work, you know, and like you do the team gear first, the kitchen, the groovers, the fire pits. It's like, don't mess with your personal gear. You can mess with that later. And then it's all reversed in the morning, right? What I found really interesting when I was, reading through the stuff, I actually did read some stuff. Nice. Unlike here, your permit says pee in the water. They want you to pee in the Colorado.
Not in a side stream, in the main channel.
Yep. Which being a non-river guy, okay, so this was a February trip, right? So, like, when we started, I was double base layers, top and bottom, plus a fleece, plus a dry suit, right? That's really hard to go to the bathroom. So I'm with 16 people. I know Kelcy and I know our son. You get to know each other really fast. Kelcy, maybe if you remember that pop story, but I remember one day it was in the afternoon and I had to go. So I stood on the raft board and some of the crew was kind of lagging behind and I hear, look, Pops has got to go. And I look back and I'm like, you're killing me. I mean, I got a dry suit on with 3 layers of underwear. And then they start chanting, Pops, 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 Pops. And I'm like, that's kind of how it goes on the river.
You get the chance to go on the Grand Canyon and everyone wants to say yes, but just the time commitment and the financial commitment, it's like not everyone can just swing that at the drop of a hat. So sometimes half the crew doesn't know each other. So I guess this crew was asking, how do we all know each other? And my friend Ryan said, oh, well, Pops over there, he adopted all of us from this little orphanage in Ohio. I forget, he had like the name of a town or whatever. And Ryan is like retelling the story to us. And he's like, I looked him in the eye. I was so sincere, all this stuff. And then he's like, I think they bought it. And he's like, then they just started asking me, what our plans for camping are. And he goes, I don't really know. I'm just a lowly kayaker. Pops is really the one running the show, which is hilarious because any river person would look over and see he's the one wearing the custy helmet and the custy life jacket, like just sitting princess on the raft. But then, so Pops really stuck the rest of and to this day, I talk to friends that were on that trip and they say, tell Derek and Pops we said hi.
Yeah, we did. We're at one stop one time and we met up with that crew and I fessed up and straightened out the story. Yeah.
There is a profound and obvious respect in the relationship between father and daughter. Despite some of these key differences in the orientation to risk, they share a mutual respect and love for both the wilderness, but also for each other's uniqueness. Though Pat introduced Kelcy to these experiences in the creeks and rivers of the North Shore, she introduced him to the experiences of rivers and wild places out west. They're still building on that relationship today.
He's always been cool in his own way. He's still an engineer. But no, he's always been cool. But I do think it's been cool to see him go out of his comfort zone. And, I think that's not all just like for my sake. I do think that he has that innate drive in himself as well.
And while she's back living in Duluth once again, Kelcy says that though she's no longer accessing the wild rivers of the West on a daily basis, her paddling days are far from over.
Living in Minnesota, certainly my paddling days have drastically dropped, and a little part of me has a little bit of FOMO about that, but for the most part I feel good and It's nice to diversify how I spend my time. And the biggest driver for coming back was, being closer to my family and my community here. And so I have no regrets with that. And I know I still have lots of paddling goals and plans, and some of them are local here now and some of them are still far away. And I don't think living in Minnesota has just completely limited me. I mean, my relationship with paddling is different being here, but no, I feel pretty good about where I'm headed.
We here at Paddle and Portage want to extend a heartfelt and sincere thank you to both Pat and Kelcy for taking the time to share both their adventurous love of the wilderness, but their heartfelt experiences of love, relationship, and loss. They actually drove up to the Paddle and Portage office to share their story in person. We couldn't be more grateful for that.
On a cold, snowy morning, no less. Not some picturesque, sunny North Shore day.
Indeed. Departing from Duluth in the dark, in the early morning dark, while the wind is howling and the snow is falling, it's not a task that many would willingly embark on, but as is true to their character, they arrived nearly on time. We also want to share a word of appreciation for our adventurous loved ones that we lose along the way. We've covered stories like this before on Paddle and Portage. We also have lost people over the years, and sharing their stories is one of the most important ways we keep them alive in our memory and in their impact and ability to continue to shape who we are to this day. So also thank you, Mary.
Yeah, and thank you to Pat for being willing to share some of those considerations and sentiments that he did with us about Mary and Kelcy, and appreciate the Huston family for their willingness to participate in this episode.
Just want to remind you all, as usual, that your stories make it on the podcast when you share them with us. Keep the emails coming, joe@paddleandportage.com. Make sure to go check out the website, like and subscribe to the podcast. Our stories are about you and for you. We'll be gathering your stories and more at Canoecopia coming up here in March of 2025.
Right around the corner, March 7th through the 9th, we'll be in Madison, and Aaron will be with us at the booth. So please, if you are at Canoecopia, stop by and say hello. We'll be presenting as a trio, as we've shared on previous episodes, and we look forward to seeing you in Madison, or if you aren't attending, look forward to hearing some of the conversations that we have at Canoecopia here on the podcast. There will be an abundance of them in both video and audio format.
Meanwhile, we're getting ready for a road trip to Madison.
We gotta stop and see Ryan Rogers.
Hey, there's a quick trip.
First stop,
Let's get some chicken nuggets. Yum.
You got barbecue sauce again? I told you I like honey mustard.
I mix them together.
I just sing when I paddle canoe, feeling, not thinking if the strokes are true. We're gonna get through to the other side. Out in the night, the waves beat the shore. You can hear them pounding, you can hear them roar. Oh, roll me, rock me in my dreams. You can roll me, rock me in my dreams. So I like to sing, I love to dance. I play the fool if I got the chance. All around the campfire light, all around the campfire light, all round, all round, all round the campfire light.